Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise and get straight to the core of what you, our listener, truly need to know. Today, we're plunging into, well, the invisible front lines of cybersecurity, the very place where you interact directly with applications every single day. We've all heard the headlines about breaches, right? But understanding how these sophisticated attacks are executed and, crucially, how organizations effectively respond. Well, that's the real shortcut to being genuinely well-informed in our increasingly digital world. Our mission on this deep dive is custom-tailored for you. We're going to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge from a stack of sources. We're covering recent application security case studies, the intricate anatomy of application layer attacks, and the absolutely critical role of incident response playbooks and runbooks. Our goal is basically to give you the strategic and tactical tools to understand this complex, yet undeniably vital area of cybersecurity.
And this isn't just about abstract technicalities. What's particularly noteworthy here is the profound business impact. Application layer incidents. These aren't merely technical glitches that get fixed quietly in the back end. They represent profound disruptions that can ripple through an entire organization. We're talking massive financial losses, sometimes irreparable reputational damage, and a complete erosion of customer trust. For anyone navigating or leading in today's digital landscape, understanding this layer is absolutely paramount.
Absolutely. It's business critical. So, what's ahead on our deep dive today? We'll kick things off by defining application layer attacks and exploring why they pose such a unique and growing danger. Then, we'll dive into 4 specific recent case studies. Spoutable, Trello, Hathaway, and Delta Dental of California. We want to see these threats in vivid, real-world action and, extract actionable lessons. Finally, we'll unpack the strategic frameworks and tactical tools like those playbooks and runbooks that modern organizations use to defend themselves when the inevitable happens. Ready to get started?
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's zoom in on something you interact with constantly, often without even realizing it. The application layer. This is a layer 7 of the OSI model, the interface where your digital experience comes alive. It's where web services, APIs, all the business logic powering every interaction you have with an app reside. My question is, why are attackers increasingly focusing their efforts here? Why this layer specifically, rather than just, brute forcing network perimeters like maybe they used to?
That's a great question. And what's truly intriguing here is how the internet itself has evolved. Years ago, the focus was definitely on hardening network infrastructure firewalls, intrusion detection at the network edge, standard stuff. But as applications became richer, more complex, and just so deeply integrated into our daily lives, they naturally became the new frontier. This layer's inherent complexity, coupled with its direct exposure to user input, well, it makes it an almost irresistible target for attackers.
Right, because that's where the interaction happens.
Exactly. And these aren't just about overwhelming bandwidth anymore. Application layer attacks go deeper. They exploit the inner workings of the software itself, the way it's coded, how it processes information, its fundamental business logic. Attackers are looking for subtle flaws in the application's design or behavior, often mimicking legitimate user interactions to hide in plain sight. It's much sneakier.
That distinction is crucial, isn't it? It's not about knocking the server offline with sheer volume like a classic DDoS, but manipulating what the application does.
Yeah.
So how do we define an application layer attack specifically? For someone who wants to grasp this concept beyond just the headlines.
Okay, so at its core, an application layer attack exploits vulnerabilities within an application's actual code, its underlying logic, or its design functionality. This is fundamentally different from, say, network-level attacks that might target bandwidth, or endpoint attacks that compromise operating systems directly. The reason they're so insidious, and frankly dangerous, is that they are notoriously harder to detect. Why? Because they mimic legitimate user behavior.
They look like normal traffic.
Precisely. They don't look like obviously malformed packets hitting a firewall. They appear to be normal interactions, just with a malicious intent woven in. To execute them successfully, an attacker often needs a surprisingly deep understanding of how the specific application works. They might reverse engineer its API or figure out its internal workflows. And their purposes are vast. Could be stealing sensitive data, disrupting availability through denial of service, gaining unauthorized access, or even manipulating the application's intended functionality entirely, often for financial gain or espionage. And critically, in many sophisticated multi-stage attack campaigns, a successful application layer exploit often serves as that crucial initial access point.
The foothold.
The foothold, exactly. It allows an attacker to then pivot, move laterally within the network, and achieve much broader, more damaging objectives.
It sounds like they're essentially speaking the application's language, but maybe with a malicious accent. if that makes
So
sense.
that's a good analogy, yeah.
So how exactly do these more sophisticated attacks typically work? What techniques do attackers leverage to pull this off, often without triggering those traditional network defenses?
Exactly. They're designed to bypass those defenses. They leverage a variety of techniques to subtly manipulate or compromise application functionality, often by exploiting really fundamental design or implementation flaws. Common exploitation points are almost universal across applications. First, you have glaring input validation flaws.
Okay, what does that mean exactly?
It means the application fails to properly sanitize or check user inputs for malicious content. Think of it like accepting any package at the door without checking what's inside. Someone slips something dangerous past the guard.
Got it.
Second, attackers target authentication and authorization weaknesses. This allows them to bypass security controls designed to restrict access. Maybe they exploit a weak password reset function or find an improperly configured role-based access control that gives them more privileges than they should have.
Sneaking into places they shouldn't be.
Right. And finally, session management issues are frequently exploited. This enables attackers to hijack legitimate user sessions that are still active. They effectively step into the user's shoes, inheriting all their permissions.
Wow.
Ultimately, these attacks often involve sending carefully crafted, malicious requests. Requests that, again, look perfectly normal at first glance, but are designed to extract sensitive data, modify the application's behavior in ways it wasn't intended, or simply exhaust its resources and disrupt its services.
That clarifies the how beautifully. Now let's get into some specific examples, because when we talk about common types of application layer attacks, we're often looking at some of the notorious entries from the OWASP Top 10 list. That list highlights the most prevalent and severe risks to web applications. Could you walk us through some of the big ones, but maybe also touch on their modern nuances or less obvious ways they're exploited today?
Certainly. These are definitely the workhorses of application layer exploitation, but their sophistication constantly evolves. Let's start with SQL injection. SQLi,
The classic.
the absolute classic. But SQL isn't just about OR one anymore, that simple trick. It's where attackers inject malicious SQL code into application inputs. Think login forms, search boxes, maybe even hidden API parameters to manipulate database queries. If successful, it can lead to unauthorized access, data theft, modification, or even full control over the database. What's particularly concerning today is its resurgence in highly targeted supply chain attacks.
So hitting third-party components.
Exactly. Injecting malicious code into a widely used library or framework can compromise thousands of downstream applications that use it. These can be incredibly subtle, often exploiting second-order effects that the application developers themselves never anticipated in their own code.
Okay, what's next on the list?
Cross-site scripting, XSS. This goes beyond simple script invention. Malicious scripts are injected into websites, often via comment fields or user profiles, that are then viewed by other unsuspecting users. These scripts can steal session tokens, hijack user accounts, deface websites, or even redirect users to malicious sites to phish credentials.
And there are different types, right?
Yes. While reflected XSS, where the script is immediately returned in the response, and stored XSS, where it's permanently stored on the server, are well known. DOM-based XSS is particularly insidious, especially in modern single-page applications, or SPAs.
Why is that?
Because client-side JavaScript frameworks often introduce new vectors for this. The vulnerability lies within the client-side execution environment itself, making traditional server-side protections insufficient. The server might never even see the malicious script.
Tricky. Okay, what else?
Remote code execution, RCE. This is one of the most severe vulnerabilities you can have. It exploits flaws that allow an attacker to execute arbitrary code directly on the server itself. This gives them significant, often complete control over the underlying system.
Game over, basically.
Pretty much. The impact here is catastrophic, full system compromise, data exfiltration, planting persistent backdoors.
Then there's denial of service, but you mentioned Layer-7 specifically.
Right. Denial of service, DOS, at Layer 7 specifically targets the application, not just the network pipe. They aim to overwhelm the application with seemingly legitimate, yet resource-intensive traffic. Things like complex search queries, repeated logins, or hitting calculation-heavy API endpoints. The goal is to exhaust its resources, database connections, CPU cycles, memory, and disrupt service availability. And what's fascinating here and dangerous is the low and slow nature of some of these attacks, like a slow Loris attack.
Low and slow.
Yeah. Unlike network DDoS, which requires massive bandwidth, these Layer-7 attacks often require minimal bandwidth. They send partial requests or hold connections open, slowly tying up server resources until none are left. This makes them incredibly difficult to distinguish from normal, albeit maybe slow, user traffic. They often exploit specific, expensive functions within an application that the attacker identifies beforehand.
Sneaky. And you mentioned APIs. They seem critical now.
Absolutely critical. API vulnerabilities are huge. With the rise of microservices and mobile apps, APIs are everywhere, and they are ripe targets. These include issues like broken authentication, where API endpoints don't properly validate who is making the request, or excessive data exposure,
What's that?
where APIs return more data than is strictly necessary for a given function. An attacker might find an endpoint that returns all user details, even if the app only needed the username. This data can then be scraped en masse. We also see improper asset management leading to undocumented or shadow APIs being exposed without proper security controls.
Wow. Okay, one more big one.
Let's cover credential stuffing compromise. This leverages human weakness more than technical flaws. Attackers take massive lists of stolen usernames and passwords from previous breaches, often freely available on the dark web, and then use automated tools to stuff them into login forms of other applications.
Hoping people reuse passwords.
Exactly, and unfortunately, many people do. When successful, it grants direct, legitimate-looking access to accounts without exploiting any technical vulnerability in the target application itself. This makes it incredibly hard to detect without sophisticated behavioral analysis or multi-factor authentication being enforced.
Wow, that's a comprehensive and, frankly, pretty scary list. Each one sounds incredibly potent, and that idea of low and slow attacks mimicking legitimate traffic is particularly concerning. So what does all this mean for you, the user, and the companies you interact with on a daily basis? It really sounds like a constant, sophisticated battle for data integrity and service availability that's playing out just under the surface.
It absolutely is. It highlights that the surface area for attack is vast and constantly evolving. It's not static. This means vigilance is required at every single level, from the developer writing the code to the security team defending it, and even to you, the end user, interacting with it and managing your credentials. It's a never-ending cat-and-mouse game, where attackers are always looking for the newest blind spot or the path of least resistance.
Theory is one thing, right? But seeing these attacks play out in the real world truly drives the lessons home. That's why we're going to dive into some recent breach case studies now.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, these recent incidents aren't just isolated events. They really highlight critical, recurring vulnerabilities that organizations, frankly, despite widespread awareness, continue to struggle with. Each one offers invaluable, actionable lessons that can and should redefine security postures.
Let's start with Spoutable. This was a new social platform, and there was a major API exposure brought to light in January 2024 by security consultant Troy Hunt, the creator of Have I Been Pound. He revealed a significant API vulnerability in the platform. What was the impact there, and what's the deeper lesson for us?
The impact was pretty significant. The breach exposed extensive user data, names, usernames, bios, email addresses, IP addresses, phone numbers, and alarmingly hashed passwords and even 2FA codes.
Whoa, 2FA codes too.
Yeah, the raw codes, apparently. Spoutable's response confirmed that email addresses and some phone numbers were indeed scraped. They did clarify that no decrypted passwords or direct messages were leaked, which is something. They moved quickly to rectify the vulnerability and advised users to change passwords and reset their two-factor authentication. But what's truly striking about Spoutable case, despite years of API security awareness and robust tools being available, is how often these fundamental vulnerabilities, like excessive data exposure, still emerge, especially in rapidly deployed platforms.
Speed versus security, maybe?
Could be. It's not just about having an API security strategy, but about constantly reevaluating the default exposure of every single API endpoint. You have to assume compromise, even for data you think is harmless.
Right.
For users, it's a stark reminder that even 2FA isn't entirely foolproof if the service provider's underlying protection for those codes is weak, or if the API just leaks them out.
Yep.
This breach affected nearly the entirety of Spoutable's user base, which is a really significant point for all digital platforms. A single API flaw can have a devastating, wide-ranging impact. Going forward, Spoutable did secure its API and engage with users. But for you, the listener, checking platforms like Have I Been Pwned is always a prudent step after hearing about incidents like this.
Absolutely. Building on that theme of exposed APIs, our next case study shifts to another January 2024 incident, this time involving Trello. They found themselves in a similar situation, but with a crucial difference in how the data was actually exfiltrated. Data from 15 million Trello users was scraped and then sold on a dark web hacker forum. The interesting twist here is that Atlassian, Trello's parent company, confirmed there was no unauthorized system access in the traditional sense. No one broke in. Instead, the data was obtained by exploiting a publicly accessible Trello REST API. Attackers use email addresses gathered from previous breach corpuses to query this public API and scrape public profile information.
Yeah, this incident dramatically underscores the persistent risks of public-facing APIs and the absolute importance of robust, granular privacy settings. It's a classic example of an attacker piecing together information from multiple sources, basically leveraging one breach to fuel another.
Connecting the dots.
Connecting the dots, exactly. What's particularly insightful here is a 2023 study by a company called Escape. They did an in-house API scan of over 5,000 public APIs on the internet. They found that 12% had serious vulnerabilities, and a startling 0.5% even had critical ones. And get this, this was from a passive scan without any authentication, just looking at what was publicly available.
Wow, that's concerning.
It really is. It raises an important question. How many public APIs out there are easily exploitable by malicious actors just by intelligently querying them? And how often do organizations fail to recognize just how much supposedly public data can be aggregated to create a privacy nightmare or fuel other attacks? Going forward, Trello updated its API to require authentication for accessing public profile information and advised users to review their privacy settings. For companies, it's a clear call for continuous monitoring and updating of security measures, especially for those public APIs that might inadvertently reveal way too much information. Yeah, I need to know what's out there.
Definitely. Our third case study takes us to December 2023 with Hathway, a prominent Indian ISP. They suffered a significant data breach via a vulnerability in their Layer-7 framework application. Laravel is a really popular PHP framework. Initially, the hacker claimed over 41 million customers were affected, which is huge. But closer analysis by hackread.com found the actual number was closer to 4 million unique affected accounts. Still massive. This included names, emails, phone numbers, home addresses, even copies of Aadhaar cards, which is the Indian national ID, and crucial Know Your Customer, or KYC, data.
Ooh, yeah. And what's truly unusual and almost unprecedented in this case is the hackers' activity after the breach. They actually created a dark web search engine specifically for individuals to check if their data was part of the leak.
Bizarre. Why would they do that?
It's hard to say for sure, maybe for notoriety, maybe to increase pressure on the company, but it's an unusual level of engagement and transparency, if you can call it that, from an attacker. It certainly created an immediate visceral understanding of the breach's scope for affected individuals. The primary lesson here, though, highlights the paramount importance of securing web applications, especially those built on popular frameworks like Laravel, against known vulnerabilities. Frameworks get patched, you need to apply those patches. It also vividly demonstrates the extensive damage that can arise from a single breach, both in terms of the sheer volume and the variety of sensitive personal information exposed, everything from contact details to government ID copies.
A treasure trove for identity thieves.
Absolutely. For companies handling such vast amounts of personally identifiable information, or PII, this emphasizes the non-negotiable need for robust security measures, regular vulnerability assessments, and, crucially, prompt patching of known flaws, particularly in widely used frameworks where vulnerabilities are often publicly disclosed. And, of course, an effective incident response plan with clear, empathetic communication to affected users is absolutely vital to manage the inevitable reputational fallout.
Okay, finally, let's look at Delta Dental of California. In September 2023, though it was disclosed later in December, this major dental insurance provider became a victim of the notorious Clop hacking group. They were hit as part of Clop's mass exploitation of a zero-day vulnerability in Progress Software's Moviet transfer solution. This was a critical SQL injection vulnerability, CVE 2023-34362. The impact was staggering, exposed personal information of nearly 7 million individuals. And what makes this particularly challenging, as I understand it, is that the Clop group exploited this vulnerability before Delta Dental could even apply the emergency patch that Progress Software released. They were incredibly fast.
That's the brutal reality of 0 days. This incident unequivocally screams about the critical importance of timely patch management, but also the inherent terrifying risks of 0-day vulnerabilities.
Define 0 day again quickly.
Sure, a 0 day is a vulnerability that is unknown to the software vendor and therefore has no patch available when it is first exploited in the wild by attackers. The vendor has 0 days to fix it before it's used. Even when a patch is eventually released, as happened relatively quickly in the MoveIt case, organizations need rapid response mechanisms to apply these security patches with extreme urgency, especially for third-party software that handles vast amounts of sensitive data. This raises a really important question for all organizations listening. Are you truly prepared for the breakneck speed of modern exploits? The window between a patch release and widespread exploitation can be incredibly narrow, sometimes just hours, not days or weeks anymore.
That's intense pressure.
It is. Delta Dental conducted extensive forensics and offered credit monitoring, which is standard procedure now. But for healthcare organizations, financial institutions, anyone holding sensitive data, this is a profound wake-up call. You need to invest not only in robust cybersecurity measures, but also in advanced monitoring that can potentially detect anomalous behavior even before a patch is available. Things like unusual data flows or system interactions. It's a testament to the fact that security is just an ongoing race against time.
So bringing these 4 cases together, Spoutable, Trello, Hathaway, Delta Dental, what does this all mean when we look at these incidents collectively? There's an undeniable pattern here, isn't there, despite the different specifics?
Absolutely. What's truly fascinating and maybe a bit depressing, here is the recurring theme across all these incidents. Whether it's an API, a web application framework, or a third-party managed file transfer solution, the application layer is consistently the point of entry. It's the weak link. It underscores that vulnerabilities aren't just theoretical concepts in a security textbook. They are actively sought out, weaponized, and exploited with brutal efficiency by attackers. The key takeaways are crystal clear, I think. 1, APIs are massive targets and need rigorous protection from the design phase all the way through deployment and ongoing monitoring. 2, patch management is utterly non-negotiable and must be executed with unprecedented speed and efficiency. Delay is deadly. And 3, securing web applications requires constant vigilance, not just a one-time audit, but continuous monitoring, regular assessment, and rapid adaptation to new threats and vulnerabilities. It's a stark reminder that even well-known vulnerability types can be devastating if not addressed immediately and comprehensively.
Okay, so given these real-world scenarios, it's painfully clear that simply reacting isn't enough. You're always behind the curve then. We need a robust, proactive strategy. This brings us to the absolutely crucial concept of incident response, or IR, particularly as it applies to this vulnerable application layer.
Exactly. We've seen a significant shift in the threat landscape over the years. Historically, cyber defenses might have focused primarily on network layer attacks, think layer 3 or 4, brute force attempts to overwhelm bandwidth, things like that. But now, with these sophisticated, subtle, and frankly far more dangerous application layer attacks at layer 7, the game has fundamentally changed. These attacks, as we've discussed, are meticulously designed to mimic legitimate user behavior. That makes them incredibly difficult to detect with traditional network monitoring tools that are just looking for weird traffic patterns. The strategic impact of a successful Layer 7 attack is profound. Direct data compromise, stolen credentials leading to further breaches, massive data exfiltration, huge financial losses, and often irreparable reputational damage.
Yeah, the trust just evaporates.
Completely. So the imperative, therefore, is to develop the capability to detect breaches that look like normal traffic and then respond in a targeted, intelligent, and rapid manner. You need different tools and different thinking.
That shift from simple network floods to these sophisticated, almost invisible application exploits really changes the entire defense game. To tackle this, organizations use a structured approach, often relying on a hierarchy of incident response documentation. So let's unpack this for our listeners. Terms like plans, playbooks, and runbooks, they aren't just security jargon, right? They're essential for clear, decisive action when a crisis hits. Can you break down the relationship between these 3 critical documents and how they work together?
Absolutely. It helps to think of it like a strategic hierarchy, kind of like military planning, within an organization's defense structure. First, at the very highest level, you have the Incident Response Plan, IRP. This is the overarching strategic document. It articulates the organization's comprehensive policy and goals for managing all cybersecurity incidents, regardless of type. It defines what actually constitutes a security incident, identifies roles and responsibilities, the who is involved in the response, and specifies general communication and reporting requirements. This is essentially the why and who of incident response. It serves as a strategic charter for the entire security program. It's the framework for all incidents.
Okay, so that's the big picture, the overarching strategy. It sets the stage for what to do in basically any crisis. What comes next, building on that foundation?
Next level down is the Incident Response Playbook. This is a more comprehensive but scenario-specific guide. It's designed for a particular class of incidents. For example, you might have a dedicated data breach playbook, a separate ransomware playbook, or a specific DDoS attack playbook.
Tailored to the threat type.
Exactly. It contains significantly more contextual information than a runbook. It details the specific goals for that type of incident, the specialized teams involved, which might differ from, say, a malware incident, and the overall strategic approach for managing that particular crisis. I like to think of it as a game plan for the entire season for a specific kind of threat, like defending against ransomware all year. It provides the strategic direction, what needs to be achieved, and by whom within that defined incident category.
Okay, strategy at the plan level, game plan at the playbook level, and then the most granular level, the run book, which sounds like where the rubber meets the road, tactically speaking.
Precisely. The Incident Response Runbook is the tactical, step-by-step instruction guide for executing a specific, repeatable task or procedure within a playbook. It is highly detailed, focused squarely on the how-to. It's the checklist. For instance, a runbook might contain the exact command line commands needed to isolate a compromised host from the network, or the specific database queries required to check for a backdoor planted by an attacker, or the precise, low-level steps to sanitize inputs during an active XSS attack.
Really specific actions.
Extremely specific. This is the play-by-play for a single game, providing the exact, often automated or semi-automated, actions to take for a given task. Now, a single playbook can, and often does, encompass multiple runbooks. It might guide a responder through a complex multi-phase incident by directing them to use Runbook A for initial containment, then Runbook B for analysis, then Runbook C for eradication. This layered structure is meticulously designed to reduce the cognitive load on responders during a high-pressure crisis. It ensures consistency, efficiency, and adherence to best practices, even when things are chaotic.
That nested hierarchical system makes so much sense for streamlining what could be incredibly chaotic moments. It brings order to the storm, hopefully. Now, to build a truly robust incident response program, aligning with standardized frameworks is essential for consistency and using proven methodology, isn't it? You don't want to reinvent the wheel during a crisis.
Absolutely not. These frameworks provide a universal language and a structured, battle-tested approach that's been refined over many incidents and years. Two of the most widely adopted and respected methodologies are NIST SP 800-61 from the U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology and the SANS six-step process. NIST defines phases like preparation, detection and analysis, containment, eradication, recovery, and post-incident activity. SANS has a very similar, highly practical structure: preparation, identification, containment, eradication, recovery, and finally, lessons learned.
They sound quite similar in concept.
They are very aligned. What's truly crucial about both frameworks, though, is the cyclical approach they promote. It's not a linear journey where you finish one incident and you're done. It's about continuous learning and improvement. Findings from the post-incident activity or lessons learned phase feed directly back into the preparation phase. This enables better preparation, faster, more effective detection, and smoother containment for future incidents. It's a living process, not a static document collecting dust on a shelf.
Right. So it's not a one and done, but a constant evolution.
Yeah.
This brings us neatly to the first and, as you said, arguably most critical phase, preparation and readiness. You often hear that the most damaging breaches stem not just from a lack of sophisticated technical tools, but from a fundamental failure to implement a mature IR program beforehand. Is that fair?
That's a profound truth, I think, and sometimes a difficult one for organizations, especially leadership, to really internalize until it's too late. Preparation is the single most critical component, not just of incident response itself, but of overall cyber resilience. It's about building a robust foundation before the storm hits. It involves testing your assumptions, refining your processes, training your people, and having the right tools configured and ready before any incident even occurs. A well-prepared organization can significantly minimize the impact of an attack simply by having the right people, processes, and tools in place, ready to execute that plan.
Part of that foundation, you mentioned people, is building a cross-functional team. This isn't just about the tech experts and the SOC, is it? It sounds like it needs to be a business function requiring coordinated effort across multiple departments. Who are the key players typically on such a team, and why is that diversity so important?
Indeed, it absolutely needs to be deeply cross-functional to be truly effective. A purely technical response, siloed within IT or security, will almost always fall short in a major incident. Key roles typically include: first, the incident commander, IC. Think of them as the quarterback or the air traffic controller. They lead the overall response effort, make critical decisions under pressure, manage resources, and serve as the main point of contact for leadership, ensuring a unified approach. They own the incident.
Okay, the leader.
Then the tech lead. This is usually a senior technical expert responsible for developing theories about how the attack happened, guiding the technical investigation team, and deciding on the specific forensic and remediation actions needed. You also have the SOC analyst incident handler. These are the technical boots on the ground, the people actually executing the tactical steps defined in the Runbooks containment, eradication, recovery actions. Crucially, you need a communications manager. This role is absolutely vital for managing internal and external messaging during a crisis. Their job is to minimize reputational damage, ensure timely, transparent, and accurate communication with stakeholders, customers, regulators, and potentially the media. This can be a make-or-break aspect of handling a major breach well.
Yeah, bad communication can make things so much worse.
Absolutely. And finally, you absolutely need a legal compliance representative involved from the start. They ensure the entire response aligns with all legal and regulatory requirements. Think about breach notification laws like GDPR in Europe or CCPA in California. These are complex, have strict timelines, and carry significant penalties for noncompliance. This structure raises an important question for listeners to consider about their own organizations. Is your company truly prepared to pull together this diverse team with all these different skill sets and perspectives under immense pressure and rapidly align them for a cohesive, coordinated response? That's where many organizations unfortunately stumble in a real crisis.
That's a fantastic point about coordination under pressure. As important as the people are, they also need the right tools in their arsenal. What are some of the essential technologies and tools that this diverse team needs to be effective, particularly when dealing with these tricky application layer attacks?
Yeah, the right tools are paramount. They serve as the eyes, ears, and sometimes the hands of your IR team. A web application firewall, WAF, is really your first line of defense, specifically at the application layer, Layer-7. It acts like a smart bouncer, constantly analyzing and filtering incoming HTTP traffic based on defined rules to block malicious requests before they even touch your application code.
So it blocks known bad stuff.
Known bad stuff, yeah, and often anomalous patterns, too. But to understand the full attack picture, especially for complex attacks, you need a security information and event management SIEM system. Think of the SIEM as your central security brain. It collects, aggregates, and correlates logs and events from everywhere that WAF your applications, databases, servers, network devices, endpoints. It helps spot subtle multi-stage attack patterns that no single tool would likely see in isolation.
Connecting the dots again.
Exactly. And then, to help manage the workload and speed up response, SO, security orchestration, automation, and response platforms are becoming increasingly important. SR tools are designed to take the manual burden out of many routine incident response tasks. They can automate repetitive actions, like blocking an IP address identified by the CM across all firewalls, or automatically enriching an alert with threat intelligence data from external feeds. This allows your human responders to focus their limited time on the critical decision-making and complex analysis. Beyond these core security tools, the crucial importance of having an accurate, up-to-date inventory of all IT assets cannot be overstated.
Knowing what you actually have.
Precisely. Hardware, software, data, understanding its criticality, who owns it. This foundational knowledge is essential for prioritizing response efforts effectively during a crisis. You can't protect what you don't know you have.
It sounds like, going back to what you said earlier, the best incident response is the one that's never actually needed. So proactive measures, prevention, must be a huge part of this preparation phase, right?
Yeah.
How much of the focus is truly on preventing incidents rather than just preparing to react to them?
That's precisely the goal, or should be. The best incident response is indeed the one that prevents an incident from ever occurring in the first place, or at least significantly mitigates its potential impact. Proactive measures are demonstrably the most cost-effective way to minimize risk in the long run. This includes several key areas. First, timely patching and updates. Rigorously closing known security gaps in operating systems, applications, frameworks, and third-party libraries. As we saw vividly with the Delta Dental Mavit case study, a patch existed but wasn't applied in time, with devastating consequences. This has to be a core discipline.
Basic blocking and tackling, but essential.
Absolutely essential. Second, continuous monitoring. This isn't just about detecting active breaches, it's about spotting unusual patterns or precursors to an attack before it fully materializes, looking for those early warning signs. Third, security awareness training. This is often underestimated or seen as just a compliance checkbox, but it's critical. It empowers every single employee to recognize phishing emails, social engineering tactics, and other common attack vectors, effectively turning your workforce into a human firewall.
The first line of defense.
Often, yes. And finally, particularly relevant for application layer security, integrating DevSecOps principles is more than just a buzzword. It's a fundamental shift-left philosophy. It means baking security into every single phase of the software development lifecycle, not just bolting it on at the end. For application layer security, this translates to things like integrating automated vulnerability scanning directly into code commits, making security reviews a mandatory part of code pull requests, automating penetration testing early and often in the development cycle. The goal is catching flaws before they ever reach production, drastically reducing the attack surface exposed to attackers.
Those proactive steps sound critical, not just nice-to-haves. And we've certainly seen plenty of cautionary tales over the years that underscore the devastating consequences of failing in this preparation phase. I mean, think about the massive Equifax breach back in 2017. Sensitive data of 147 million people exposed, largely attributed to a failure in patch management for a known vulnerability in Apache struts. Or go back further to the Target breach in 2013. That originated from credentials stolen from a compromised third-party HVAC vendor, combined with reports of unheeded system alerts from their own security tools that allowed the attack to go undetected for weeks while data was exfiltrated. These aren't just historical footnotes, they're grim, multi-million-dollar lessons.
Those cases are incredibly sobering reminders, aren't they? Even with sophisticated tools deployed, a breakdown in fundamental proactive measures, be it timely patching, effective monitoring, proper vendor risk management, or just acting on the alerts you receive, can lead to catastrophic results. They unequivocally prove that an effective IR program isn't just about reacting well to an attack. It's fundamentally about proactively identifying and mitigating vulnerabilities before they can ever be exploited. It's about building a security-aware culture that values prevention just as much as, if not more than, response.
Okay, so we've established the crucial importance of preparation. Moving into phase 2 of the typical IR lifecycle, we have detection and analysis. This phase is all about recognizing that an incident might be occurring, and then gathering the necessary information to determine its scope and severity. It's about spotting those subtle signs in what might be a sea of normal activity.
Exactly. And detecting an application layer incident, as we've stressed, requires looking far beyond simple network traffic volumes because they often mimic legitimate behavior so well. The indicators of compromise, or IOCs, at this layer are often behavioral and quite subtle. You need sophisticated monitoring and analysis. We're looking for things like unusual traffic spikes to specific application endpoints, particularly sensitive ones like login pages, password reset functions, data export APIs, or critical search pages, especially if these spikes don't correlate with known business activity, like a marketing campaign launch.
Spikes without a reason.
Right. Also, an increase in server resource usage like CPU or memory utilization without a corresponding increase in legitimate user traffic is a major red flag. It could indicate inefficient malicious queries or resource exhaustion attacks. Database errors popping up in application logs are key signals too. Things like unexpected SQL syntax errors, anomalies in query performance, queries suddenly taking much longer, or an unexpected number of records being retrieved by a single query.
The database acting weird.
Precisely. Also, unusual login attempts, maybe a surge in failures or successful logins coming from unexpected geographic locations, or logins using anomalous user agent strings that don't match typical browsers, and don't discount the human element. Even things like employees reporting unexpected emails from known individuals, perhaps asking for urgent action or prompting extreme feelings. These can be precursors to sophisticated social engineering attempts aimed at gaining that initial foothold needed for an application layer attack. You need to listen to those reports.
Those are incredibly specific and actionable indicators, much more nuanced than just network traffic volume. So once a potential incident is detected based on these indicators, the team needs to rapidly triage and scope the event. They need to figure out how bad it is, right? Determine its severity and potential impact. How do organizations turn this abstract risk into a concrete, actionable plan using something like a severity and escalation matrix?
A clear, well-defined severity and escalation matrix is absolutely essential for this triage process. It's pre-agreed upon during the preparation phase. It transforms that abstract sense of something bad is happening into a concrete, actionable plan. It ensures the right level of attention from the right stakeholders at the right time based on potential business impact. For instance, a typical matrix might look something like this. Critical severity. This would be triggered by a major service outage affecting all users, confirmed widespread data exfiltration of highly sensitive data, or evidence of total system compromise across multiple critical systems. This indicates total or near total business disruption. The required response time here is immediate, we're talking minutes. Escalation goes straight to C-level executives, legal counsel, and public relations, because the business impact is paramount and decisions need to be made fast.
All hands on deck.
Absolutely. Then you have high severity. This might involve compromise of sensitive data for a significant number of records, severe service degradation affecting a core business function, but maybe not total outage, or compromise of a critical system. This results in partial but significant business disruption. The response time here might be targeted within 1 hour. Escalation typically goes to IT directors, relevant department heads, and maybe key business unit leaders who can authorize necessary operational changes or resource allocation.
Still very urgent.
Very urgent. Next, medium severity. This could be unauthorized access to non-critical data, compromise of a less critical system, or a limited operational impact affecting only a subset of users or functions. Response time might be targeted within 4 hours or during business hours. Escalation usually goes to the IT security manager level. And finally, low severity. This could cover things like an isolated policy violation, a minor security event with minimal impact, like a single endpoint malware detection that was contained, or suspicious activity that requires investigation but poses no immediate threat. Response here might be targeted for the next business day.
That structure makes sense.
This structured approach ensures that the truly critical incidents receive prompt, high-level attention, that the appropriate stakeholders are brought into the loop without delay, and that resources are allocated effectively. It prevents less critical issues from monopolizing attention during a major crisis, which is a common failure mode.
That's a fantastic blueprint for turning what could be chaos into a manageable sequence of actions based on severity. Now we're getting into the real action phase, phase 3. Containment, eradication, and recovery. This sounds like the core of the tactical response where the team takes decisive action to limit the damage and eventually restore normal operations.
This is truly where the rubber meets the road, yeah. Where all that planning and preparation, those playbooks and runbooks, are put to the ultimate test under fire. The immediate goal of containment is exactly what it sounds like. Stop the bleeding, stop the spread of the incident, and prevent the attacker from doing any further damage. This involves both short-term, immediate actions and sometimes longer-term strategies. Short-term might mean things like isolating affected systems from the network to prevent lateral movement, disabling compromised user accounts or credentials immediately, blocking malicious IP addresses identified at the network firewall or the WF.
Cutting off the attacker's access.
Exactly. Long-term containment might focus more on preventing recurrence once the immediate threat is neutralized. For example, implementing specific firewall rules to block the attack vector used, patching the specific vulnerabilities that were exploited across the environment, or implementing stronger, more granular access controls to limit the potential impact of future compromises. It's about drawing a line in the sand and ensuring the attacker can't easily get back in or do more harm.
Okay, so you've stopped the bleeding with containment. Then it's about eradication, getting rid of the threat for good. And this often goes hand in hand with forensic analysis, doesn't it? To truly understand what happened and make sure you got everything.
Yes, eradication focuses on identifying and completely eliminating the root cause of the incident. And it absolutely requires thorough forensic analysis to ensure no lingering threats or backdoors remain. It's not enough just to patch the initial vulnerability. This is often a multi-step process within eradication. First, you need to stop the bleed definitively by addressing the exploited vulnerability immediately and properly. For in SQL injection, as we discussed, that means implementing parameterized queries or stored procedures in the code itself, not just filtering. For an XSS attack, it means rigorous input validation and context-aware output encoding to neutralize malicious scripts wherever they might appear.
Fixing the hole they got through.
Right. Then a meticulous find and remove backdoors process is initiated. This is critical. Attackers often leave persistent access mechanisms behind. This involves thoroughly searching system logs, network traffic, file systems, databases, and configurations for any malicious code, unauthorized user accounts, especially privileged ones, hidden administrative tools, scheduled tasks, or any other persistence mechanisms the attacker might have planted. For an Skillet attack, for example, an attacker might have created new admin accounts in the database or enabled dangerous database procedures like XPCMD shell to gain operating system access later. You have to hunt these down.
Looking for hidden surprises.
Exactly. Finally, you need to clean the data if it was altered. This involves identifying and cleaning any modified or corrupted data, often by restoring it from verified clean backups taken before the compromise occurred, to ensure data integrity is restored.
And after all that intense work, containment, eradication, forensics, the final step in this action phase is recovery, getting everything back to normal, but hopefully even better, more secure than before.
That's the goal. The recovery phase is about meticulously restoring all affected systems and services to a secure, trusted, and fully operational state. This crucially involves restoring systems and data from clean, verified backups to ensure no lingering, malicious code or corrupted information remains from the incident. You don't want to restore the malware along with the data. It means meticulously verifying the integrity and functionality of all restored services before bringing them back online for users. Testing is key here, and it is absolutely essential to ensure that the vulnerability that allowed the incident is confirmed to be no longer exploitable, and that the entire environment is fully secure and hardened before resuming normal operations. Rushing this recovery step or bringing systems back online prematurely without full validation can easily lead to a quick recompromise, sometimes within hours, undoing all the hard work of containment and eradication. Recovery is about carefully rebuilding trust and ensuring future resilience, not just flipping the switch back on.
That makes perfect sense. Take the time to do it right. Now, incident response is often described as a cyclical process, not linear. And this final phase, phase 4, post-incident activity, is arguably the most important for long-term security improvement. This is where the real learning truly happens, right? To prevent future incidents.
Exactly. It's the feedback loop. After an incident is fully resolved, systems are recovered, and the dust has settled a bit, a thorough lessons learned review or postmortem meeting is conducted. This meeting should involve all relevant stakeholders who participated in the response, from the technical teams on the ground to the incident commander to legal, communications, and maybe even executive leadership, depending on the severity. Crucially, the primary goal of this review is not about assigning blame. That's counterproductive. It's about critically, honestly, and objectively analyzing the entire incident and the response effort to identify what went well, what didn't go well, and where improvements can be made.
A blame-free postmortem.
Essential for honesty. Key questions are relentlessly asked. How was the incident detected, and could it realistically have been detected sooner with different tools or processes? Were the containment strategies effective and efficient, or did they cause unintended side effects? Was communication clear, timely, and accurate across all internal and external channels? What resources, tools, personnel, skills, documentation were needed but were unavailable or insufficient during the response? And perhaps most importantly, could this specific incident have been prevented in the first place with different security controls or practices? And what specific changes are required to ensure it doesn't happen again?
And those invaluable insights gleaned from the postmortem, they don't just sit in a report, right? They feed directly into continuous improvement, making the organization stronger over time.
They absolutely must. That's the whole point of the cycle. The insights gained from the postmortem are meticulously documented, actionable recommendations are developed, and then these are fed directly back into the preparation phase. This creates that continuous cycle of improvement we talked about. This feedback might lead to updating security policies, refining existing procedures in Playbooks or Runbooks, conducting new or more targeted training for staff on specific threats or tools, justifying investment in new technologies to fill identified gaps, or improving monitoring and detection rules based on how the last attack occurred. This continuous feedback loop is what truly transforms a merely reactive incident response capability into a proactive, resilient, and constantly improving security posture. It builds organizational muscle memory. This raises, I think, an important question for organizations. How can you better embed this culture of continuous learning into your very fabric, making it an integral, non-negotiable part of your ongoing security strategy rather than just an occasional reactive afterthought following a major fire drill? #tag to practice playbooks and tools.
Okay, that really highlights the strategic importance of that full IR lifecycle, and especially the learning loop. Now that we understand the strategic framework, let's look at how specific threats are tackled on a more tactical level. We're getting into the real how-to. with those runbooks, the step-by-step instructions we talked about earlier. Let's take in SQL injection, SQL attack as our first example. How would a detailed runbook actually guide a security team step by step through detecting, containing, eradicating, and recovering from this classic, yet still incredibly potent application layer threat?
Okay, yeah, let's walk through a hypothetical SQL runbook. For detection, the runbook would likely specify multiple triggers and data sources to check. Firstly, way alerts. The runbook would specify looking for alerts specifically configured to block or flag suspicious SQL keywords appearing in user inputs like or 1E1, union select, XBCMD shell, or even just semicolons, which might indicate stacked queries. Beyond the way, the runbook would mandate analyzing application and database logs. Specific instructions would be given on querying these logs for things like a sudden spike in SQL syntax errors, database queries that unexpectedly retrieve an unusually large number of records compared to normal behavior, or evidence of dangerous stored procedures like SPCMD shell or XBCMD shell being invoked, which strongly suggests an attempt at OS-level access. Behavioral anomalies monitored by a SIEM or User Entity Behavior Analytics UABO tool might also be triggers noted in the runbook, like a sudden increase in failed logins from a specific source or evidence of unauthorized data access patterns.
So multiple detection points. What about containment?
For containment, the runbook would provide very specific, prioritized actions. The first instruction might be to immediately take the affected application component or database offline, or at least restrict its access, to prevent further data loss or system manipulation. This is often a hard decision with business impact, so the runbook needs to be clear. Next, it would instruct the analyst to identify the malicious source IP addresses from the WA application or network logs and block them immediately at the network firewall and the WAF layer. Cut off their current access. Concurrently, the runbook would reference the main incident response plan for communication protocols, instructing the handler to notify all relevant stakeholders, legal, public relations, management teams, as per the defined communication plan, initiating the broader organizational response. The goal here is swift action to stop the bleeding as quickly and safely as possible.
Okay, stop the bleeding. Now eradication, getting rid of the infection.
Right. For eradication, the runbook gets very technical. The absolute priority is patching the underlying vulnerability. The runbook would specify the correct way to fix SECLA, which is by rewriting the vulnerable code to use parameterized queries, prepared statements, or properly implemented stored procedures. It might explicitly say not to rely solely on input filtering or blacklisting, as those are often bypassable.
Emphasizing the right fix.
Exactly. However, the runbook might also acknowledge that for legacy applications, this code rewrite can be a significant refactoring effort, and might detail approved temporary mitigation steps if an immediate code fix isn't feasible, while stressing the need for a permanent fix. Then, the runbook details the hunt for backdoors. It would provide specific SQL queries tailored to the organization's database engine, for example, SQL Server, MySQL, Oracle, to search for evidence of persistence. Newly created user accounts, especially admin-level ones, altered permissions on existing accounts or objects, or the presence or recent execution of known dangerous stored procedures. Finally, the runbook would guide the process of identifying and cleaning any modified or corrupted data, likely involving coordination with database administrators, and potentially restoring affected tables or the entire database from a verified, known good backup taken before the estimated time of compromise.
Very thorough. And finally, recovery.
Recovery actions in the runbook would start with instructions for restoring the database from the most recent known good backup, assuming eradication was successful. If deeper compromise beyond just the database, such as remote code execution via SQL, is suspected, the runbook might mandate re-imaging the affected web or application server entirely from a clean, golden image baseline to ensure no OS-level malware remains. The crucial final step before declaring the incident closed and resuming normal operations is verification. The runbook would require performing security scans, potentially a targeted code review of the fix, and maybe even a focused penetration test to independently verify that the specific SQL vulnerability is no longer exploitable and that the system is clean, hardened, and safe to bring back online. Only then is recovery complete.
That's incredibly detailed and practical. It really shows how a runbook turns strategy into specific actions, emphasizing that even old threats like SQL require modern, structured, and verified responses. Let's quickly look at another prevalent threat, a cross-site scripting XSS attack. How does a runbook guide the response here? Given its often client-side nature, it seems different from SQL.
It is different, yeah. For an XSS attack, the runbook would adjust accordingly. Detection might primarily rely on WIFE alerts again, specifically those configured to block common XSS payloads like script, on error, onload, appearing in input fields, or URL parameters. Browser-side security mechanisms like content security policies, CSP violation reports being logged centrally might also be a key detection source specified in the runbook. Containment for XSS would focus on immediately preventing further malicious scripts from being stored or executed by users. The runbook might instruct responders to implement aggressive output encoding on the affected pages as a quick fix, or perhaps temporarily disable the specific vulnerable input fields or comment sections until a proper code fix can be deployed. And eradication for XSS involves patching the application code itself. The runbook would emphasize fixing the underlying input validation and, more importantly, context-aware output encoding flaws that allowed the XSS to occur in the first place. It would stress ensuring all user-supplied data is properly neutralized before it's rendered in the browser, regardless of the context, HTML body, attribute, JavaScript block, etc.
So tailored steps for the specific attack vector. Those runbooks clearly provide a detailed roadmap. Beyond these individual attack types, what are some overarching best practices for application layer incident response that organizations should adopt to build a truly resilient security posture in today's complex environments?
That's a great question. Several best practices are really crucial for maturing an application layer IR program beyond just having basic plans. First, multi-cloud compatibility is pretty much non-negotiable now. Organizations operate across hybrid environments, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, maybe on-prem Kubernetes clusters. Playbooks and runbooks must be adaptable to function effectively in these diverse environments. This often means leveraging cloud-native security tools like AWS Guard Duty, Azure Security Center logs, Google Security Command Center for cloud-specific logging, detection, and even automated response actions within those platforms. Your runbook needs to know how to block an IP in AWS and Azure, for instance.
Just can't have siloed responses.
Exactly. Second, automation is key to speed and consistency. This means going beyond just scripting small tasks. It involves integrating security deeply into CI/CD pipelines, so maybe every code change automatically triggers vulnerability scans. It means connecting CM alerts directly to SIR platforms that can automatically fetch more logs, enrich the alert with threat intelligence, and even kick off initial containment steps like blocking an IP or disabling a user account based on predefined logic in the runbook. Automation frees up humans for harder problems. Third, testing must be continuous and rigorous. You can't just write playbooks and assume they work. Conduct regular simulations, everything from simple drills to full-scale tabletop exercises involving leadership to test readiness. Simulate specific attacks like SQLi, XSS, or sophisticated API attacks relevant to your applications. These tests inevitably uncover gaps in documentation, tools, or training before a real incident forces the issue.
Practice like you play.
Precisely. Fourth, compliance needs to be baked in. Aligning your IR program with established frameworks like NIST SP 861 or the CISA framework isn't just good practice, it's often required. Playbooks and runbooks should explicitly include necessary steps for evidence preservation, documentation, and reporting required by regulations like GDPR, APEP, PCI DSS, or others relevant to your industry. This isn't just about avoiding fines, it builds a structured, auditable, and legally defensible program. And finally, reinforcing what we discussed earlier, continuous improvement must be institutionalized. Meticulous post-incident reviews, feeding lessons learned back into preparation, and maintaining strict version control for all IR documentation, plans, playbooks, runbooks ensures the program evolves and stays effective against the ever-changing threat landscape. It's never done.
Those are excellent points: adaptability, automation, testing, compliance, and that crucial feedback loop. It's clear that a robust framework and rigorous processes are essential. But let's circle back quickly to the actual tools and technologies that make all this possible. We mentioned some of them throughout our conversation, but could you summarize the essential toolkit for a modern application layer IR team, perhaps revisited with this context of advanced defense and automation?
Sure. To put these best practices into action effectively, certain categories of tools become pretty indispensable, often forming a layered defense strategy. For real-time blocking of many common application attacks at the edge, web application firewalls, WFs, are critical. Think providers like AWS WAF, Cloud Native, Imperva, Cloudflare, F5. The app is that intelligent bouncer we talked about. For collecting, correlating, and analyzing the sheer volume of application log data, web server logs, database audit logs, API gateway logs, application trace data, SIEM logging solutions are fundamental. Popular choices include Splunk, the Elastic Stack, ELK Elasticsearch, Logstash, Kibana, Sumo Logic, or cloud-native options like Azure Sentinel or Google Chronicle. They act as the central nervous system for threat detection and investigation. The brain, yeah. Then you have dedicated IR platforms. Tools like Wiz, Rootly, or Tines are emerging specifically to help manage and orchestrate the incident response process itself, tracking incidents, managing playbooks and runbooks, automating communication, and providing a single pane of glass for response coordination. For automating those repetitive tasks and orchestrating complex workflows across different security tools, SR platforms like exactly. And I'd add one more thing that's particularly transformative for application security specifically. Newer solutions are emerging that provide enhanced visibility from within the application itself. For instance, solutions using techniques like runtime application self-protection, RASP, or embedded instrumentation like Contrast Security's platform can monitor and even block attacks from inside the application's runtime environment. This approach can cut through the noisy false positives that WFs sometimes generate because it understands the application's actual behavior and data flow. It enables SOC teams to potentially directly control responses within the app and, crucially, can provide incredibly precise code-level remediation guidance directly back to developers, telling them exactly which line of code is vulnerable and how to fix it. This level of deep insight and integrated control is truly revolutionary for securing complex, modern applications. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow. What an incredible journey we've taken today. We've really gone deep, haven't we? We started by understanding the ever-present threat of these sophisticated application layer attacks, often hiding in plain sight within seemingly normal traffic. Then we looked at the vivid, practical lessons learned from those real-world breaches, Spoutable, Trello, Hathaway, and Delta Dental. Those stories really underscore the constant high-stakes battle for data integrity and service availability, a battle that directly impacts all of us, every day.
They really bring the risks into sharp focus.
Absolutely. We then dove deep into the critical importance of having a structured, multi-layered incident response strategy. We unpacked how it's defined by those clear, high-level plans, comprehensive scenario-specific playbooks, and those really tactical, step-by-step runbooks. It's become abundantly clear throughout our conversation that effective defense isn't just about buying the latest shiny tools. It's fundamentally about proactive preparation, building truly cross-functional teams, leveraging smart automation, and maintaining a relentless commitment to continuous improvement, that crucial learning loop that feeds back into making us all more secure over time.
Couldn't agree more. It's a continuous process, not a destination.
We really hope this deep dive has equipped you, our listener, with crucial insights. Whether you're prepping for a meeting at work, trying to catch up on this vital field of cybersecurity, or maybe you're just immensely curious about the unseen digital battles happening all around us. This knowledge is truly fundamental, we believe, for understanding the complex digital world we navigate every single day.
And perhaps as we conclude, here's a final thought for you to ponder, something to mull over. In a world where applications truly are the new battleground, and where even normal-looking traffic can hide a sophisticated attack, how can we as technologists, as business leaders, as users, truly foster a culture of security where every developer, every employee, and every organization is not just reactive, but becomes instinctively resilient? Where that idea of shifting left security isn't just a buzzword on a slide, but a lived, breathed reality in how we build and operate software. That's the real challenge ahead, isn't it?
That is a powerful thought to end on, a challenge for all of us. We encourage you to consider your own digital footprint, maybe to question and reflect on the security practices of the platforms and services you rely on, and perhaps advocate for robust defense and preparedness wherever you can. Your awareness, your questions, they are a powerful defense in themselves. Thank you so much for joining us on The Deep Dive.